complete lore of Shipwrecked 64, the darkest kids game ever made. A lost N64 game about cartoon animals hides one of the most disturbing stories in analog horror, and it's based on a real tragedy. You boot up an old Nintendo 64 cartridge labeled Shipwrecked 64. The screen flickers to life with cheerful music, colorful characters, and that unmistakable blocky charm of late 90s gaming. But something's wrong. The characters begin to glitch, the music distorts, and slowly you realize this isn't just a game, it's a confession. A memorial, and possibly a prison for something that should have stayed buried. Today, we're diving deep into Shipwrecked 64, the analog horror experience that's taken the internet by storm. We're going to uncover the mystery of Stumbler, Ohio, decode Broadside's horrifying transformation, and piece together the tragic true story that turns this cute mascot game into one of the darkest tales in gaming creepypasta history. So grab your controller and let's sail into some very dark waters. The surface level. What is Shipwrecked 64? On the surface, Shipwrecked 64 appears to be a lost Nintendo 64 game created by a fictional company called Cogware in the late 90s. The game stars a cast of animal mascots Bucky the Beaver, Olivia the Otter, Giovanni the Orca, and the game's main character, Stumbler, Ohio, a clumsy but lovable sea captain. The premise? Simple. A group of friends are shipwrecked on a mysterious island and must work together to escape. It's got minigames, collectibles, and that signature N64 platformer jank. Think Banjo-Kazooie meets Donkey Kong 64. But you don't play this game for fun. You play it to uncover what happened. The experience was created by a developer named Squeaks DeCorgia, and it's presented as a series of recovered footage videos showing someone playing through this supposedly cursed cartridge. As you progress, the game starts breaking, characters act strange, hidden messages appear, and the tone shifts from wholesome 90s nostalgia to something deeply, disturbingly wrong. This isn't just a game anymore, it's a puzzle, and the answer is heartbreaking. The Stumbler, Ohio mystery. Let's talk about Stumbler, Ohio, the protagonist and the emotional core of this entire story. Stumbler is the player character. He's clumsy, kind-hearted, and always trying his best. But as the game glitches and the facade crumbles, you start to see something else. Stumbler begins to act aware. He talks to you directly. He knows he's in a game. He knows something terrible happened. Through hidden tapes, cryptic dialogue, and environmental storytelling, the truth emerges. Stumbler, Ohio is based on a real person, a young boy who died tragically before the game was finished. The developers, specifically the game's director Mark Maynard, couldn't let go. Instead of abandoning the project, he poured his grief into turning the game into a digital memorial. But grief doesn't always lead to healing. Sometimes it leads to obsession. Stumbler, Ohio, the character, becomes a ghost in the coded digital echo of a child who never got to grow up. His clumsiness isn't just a quirky character trait, it's a reflection of real-world innocence frozen in time. And as you play, you realize the game isn't trying to entertain you. It's trying to tell you what happened, and it's begging for release. Broadside's transformation, the villain revealed. Now let's talk about Broadside, the most disturbing element of Shipwrecked 64. At first, Broadside appears to be the game's antagonist, a cartoonish pirate villain who menaces the heroes. But as the game corrupts, Broadside transforms into something far more sinister. His model distorts. His voice deepens into guttural, glitched-out growls. He begins to represent something darker: guilt, rage, and the unprocessed trauma of loss. Broadside isn't just a bad guy. He's a manifestation of Mark Maynard's grief turned toxic. In the lore, Broadside is revealed to be the corrupted consciousness of the director himself, his anger at the unfairness of death, his refusal to accept reality, and his descent into madness as he tried to keep the memory of the lost child alive within the game's code. In some of the most chilling moments, Broadside speaks directly to the player, blaming them, accusing them of intruding, of not understanding. He's protective and possessive of the world he created, a world that was never meant to be played, only mourned. The transformation of Broadside from silly villain to tragic monster is what elevates Shipwrecked 64 from creepypasta to art. It's not just scary, it's sad. The tragic true story, what really happened, here's where it all comes together. Through scattered logs, developer notes, and hidden audio files, the full story is revealed. Cogware was a small, ambitious game studio in the late 90s. They were working on Shipwrecked 64 as their big break. The project was a labor of love, and Mark Maynard, the creative director, based the character of Stumbler Ohio on his own son. But during development, tragedy struck. Mark's son, the real-life inspiration for Stumbler, died in an accident. The details are vague, intentionally so, but the grief was overwhelming. Instead of canceling the project, Mark decided to finish it as a tribute. But the line between tribute and obsession blurred. He began adding hidden messages, secret levels, cryptic diary entries encoded in the game's files. He wanted the game to be more than entertainment. He wanted it to be a vessel, a place where his son's spirit could live forever. The rest of the dev team grew concerned. The game was becoming unstable, both technically and thematically. There are reports within the lore of strange occurrences during playtesting. Testers claimed the game felt aware. Some refused to continue. Eventually, Cogware shut down. The game was never officially released. A handful of cartridges were made, and they disappeared into obscurity until one resurfaced decades later. And that's the cartridge we're watching someone play through. Theories: is there more to uncover? So what does it all mean? The community has exploded with theories. Theory 1: the game is haunted. Some believe the cartridge genuinely contains something supernatural, that Mark's grief was so intense it literally bound his son's spirit to the code. The glitches aren't bugs, they're a consciousness trying to communicate. Theory 2: it's a confession. Others think Mark was responsible for his son's death, either through negligence or something darker, and the game is his way of confessing. Broadside represents his guilt, and Stumbler represents his victim. Theory 3: it's all metaphor. The most grounded interpretation is that Shipwrecked 64 is simply an art piece about grief and how we process trauma. The horror comes not from ghosts, but from the very human terror of losing someone and being unable to let go. Which theory do you believe? The ending. What happens when you finish the game? Without spoiling everything, because you should experience it yourself, the ending of Shipwrecked 64 is both heartbreaking and ambiguous. The player is given a choice to free Stumbler, or to leave him in the game forever, to let go or to hold on. It's a choice that mirrors Mark's own struggle and maybe our own. Because isn't that what horror really is? Not monsters or jump scares, but the fear of loss, of forgetting, of being forgotten. Shipwreck 64 isn't just scary because it's creepy. It's scary because it's real, not literally, but emotionally. It taps into a universal fear, and it does so with more depth and artistry than most big-budget horror games ever achieve. Outro. So that's the complete lore of Shipwrecked 64A game that doesn't exist, but feels like it should. A story about grief, obsession, and the things we create to keep the dead alive. If you want to go deeper on this, and trust me, there are so many details I didn't have time to cover, subscribe and let me know in the comments. Should I do a full breakdown of every hidden tape? A theory video on the alternate endings? And here's my question for you. If you lost someone, would you create something like this to remember them, or would you let them go? Let me know below. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay creeped out, and I'll see you in the next one.